but started to pull like, recent blog posts and reference the company, like you did your homework on them. Part of the problem is so often if you do it with automation, you end up grabbing the wrong thing. So you can literally embarrass yourself as often as it actually might help you. But because it's been done so much, everybody can read through it. And it doesn't really come off as natural to begin with. Like if I'm going to ask if somebody has a hiring challenge, right? I say they need a really good sales rep. Why would I really reference anything about them online unless they actually had a job posting, right? Maybe that. But outside of that, there's nothing about what their, appearance in some blog. Like, why would I ever reference that? That doesn't make any sense. So I think people on the, they try to use that as a way to customize the automation and personalize it, obviously. But it comes off to me as it's easy to read through.
It's really activity. I can't stress it enough in organizations. Either there's not enough of it or the organizations just don't know. Well, I think I hear the word, I hear this word about-a. You ever hear, it's about-a. About is one, not a real word, but two, in the sales world was probably the worst word you can hear, about-a. It's about-a. It's about-a. So don't be an about-a company, okay?
Unfinished Business podcast show with your host, David Sliman.
All right, today on Unfinished Business, we're going to dive into the world of B2B sales systems and inbound lead generation, email marketing, business development. And I have the expert on today. Not only do I know about his background, but I've worked with him on projects. And he is a true expert in scaling companies, dialing in sales engines, lead generation, B2B marketing. And listen, his passion is about helping companies turn outbound chaos into inbound consistency. So from crafting the right emails to putting the right messaging together and structuring sales organizations, he has a lot of experience in this, and we've hit it off a while back and really love working with Kevin. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Kevin Downey. Kevin, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet, brother. All right, let's jump into it. So we're going to explore the world of B2B marketing. Okay. It's going to be part of our topic today. Sales. We'll talk some sales recruiting too, because I know we've talked a lot about that. We're getting to dive into that. But let's start with lead generation and ROI. What are the most effective ways to drive inbound leads for B2B companies right now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are a little more intermittent that are always effective. So targeted trade shows can be great.
Okay.
Webinars, when put on well, can be phenomenal, but you've got to be able to drive a lot of traffic, and you can't do them every day. But from a daily lead generation standpoint, it's high volume email and reps, right? Reps doing cold outreach, high volume email to drive inbound leads. That's the day to day.
Great, man. Great. And so when you talk about the lead generation and consistency, what's the highest ROI when it comes to the B2B lead generation? I mean, when it comes to the platforms you use and the things that you like to execute, I know we've worked on this together. What are the most strategic ways to really get that highest ROI?
Well, email, if done correctly, is highest ROI just because of the cost factor relative to the volume. I mean, you just can't beat it. Whether you're spending a couple $100 a month, or let's say, on different infrastructures, $500-$600 a month, it's still impossible for a rep to match up with that, right? But reps, when targeted and doing a good job, I mean, we can dig into US versus Latin America and that kind of stuff. But reps in Latin America are very hard to beat because of the cost factor per month. But, business development with reps in USA can be really, really good if they're targeted and they're dialed in, no pun intended. They're doing what they're supposed to do and the volume is there. You can make it work.
So listen, and I really, because I learned a ton of education, with us working together on this.
Sure.
And for me, email marketing to me was like, okay, let's dial in a platform to layer into our CRM, and let's shoot out some emails to the leads within our CRM system and roll in that API and, pump out a couple hundred emails a day. But why do you think so many B2B And not even B2B, even B2C companies struggle
Sure.
to use email effectively to drive leads, because I had a total different vision about email marketing until you and I started working together. And I want
Sure.
to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it comes down to numbers in a lot of ways. Like I think the most, when you watch, when I have dealt with companies over time and owners as
Mhm.
well as marketing leaders and some sales leaders, and they talk about how they're trying to use email, it's almost always on a CRM. The CRMs are not built for volume. And so they're doing really low volume of emails. And volume is key. It's important no matter how anybody talks about it. Volume is important. And then the other thing is, I think they do email wrong because they follow each other. They watch a lot online. I mean, we started this way 8 years ago. I started doing email and
Yeah.
did traditional sequences, and you thread some emails together and you market to people and you try to drive them to a call. And it took me a few months to realize, well, it doesn't work all that well, right? And even with
Yeah.
volume, it doesn't work that well. But also I looked at it and said, well, this isn't what we would do on a call. What we want to do with email is what we do on a call, on the front end of a cold call. And so learning all of that and thinking about it from that vantage point and then plugging in the volume, tying in the volume part, that's how I really learned how to do email and make it super effective.
Yeah. And I want to be specific on these numbers. We're not
Sure.
talking 600 a day, 500 a day. I mean, we're talking 6,000 emails a day,
Yeah,
right?
or layers of
And
that, right?
or layers of that, or
Right.
sequences of that, which could be, that type of number. But that's the kind of understanding that I really want to open up here. Is, again, going into this, I was thinking, well, if we send out 1,000 emails a day or 500 emails a day, that's a lot of emails. But no, we're talking about effectively, one, dialing in the targets, which we'll get into here in a second,
Sure.
and then two, rolling out sequences or email campaigns that hit a volume number of anywhere from 5 to 6,000 a day.
Right.
And that's a real big difference, and a big differentiator that I want our listeners to understand.
Yeah, I mean, depending on infrastructure, right? So we kind of teach two different infrastructures, and so one, if you look at the server side, let's talk about the one that maybe you're not as familiar with, like Mailreef, and you combine that. They have their own CMS now, but you combine that with, let's say, a Smartlead. That kind of infrastructure, we're talking about sending about 2,500 cold emails a day per server, right? And
Yeah.
that's how many you can send. Longevity of that, and you're doing a lot more reputation management, so it's got more longevity, but it's more expensive. There's more layers and it's harder to manage, but it is very effective. And then you've got Apollo with an email API in this case, where we're sending 6,000 a day. We're doing it over a single domain, single email address. The latter is much easier to run. And I, when we got to a peak, because I sent maybe 100, 105, 110 million emails for clients over 8 years. When we were at a peak, I mean, I had a couple of clients, we were sending 24, 30, 36,000 emails a day. And again, understanding that our prospect list really dictates our target volume. If
Yeah.
I have, what do we calculate, 36,000 a day at, 20 days. So that's 700 and some thousand. If I have 750,000 people to go after, I can justify that kind of volume because I want to email
Yes.
them roughly one time per month, and really no more than that unless we have to.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you have the target list that's big enough, and some will, not very many, but certain industries can have 1 million or close to 1 million contacts to go after. Boy, let's set up the structure to send 1 million emails a month. Right. That's ultimately what we want to
That's
do.
key. It's great. And listen,
Right.
in this email marketing strategy, right, the mastery of doing this, I'm going to ask a loaded question here, but how important is the target list? I mean, and how do you
Very.
work with companies that and identify that? Because how many times have you come in and they go, well, I think my target list this and that. Actually, in a situation, where in times where I've worked in companies, I'll go in and they think their target list is one thing, and then really when you start dissecting it and identifying what types of businesses work well, what don't work well, it changes. But what's your experience in that?
So prospect list is important in the sense that we don't want to waste emails, right? Email doesn't cost very much, but the challenge that companies have to understand is that You need open rate. You need, more importantly, response rate, right? Replies are the key. So driving
Yes.
replies is key to generate leads, identify decision maker and pain point. We can dig into that. But on the email infrastructure side, the replies are important because that is engagement, and it keeps the health of the infrastructure higher. So targeting is important because we need people to reply. If you're emailing people that have nothing to do with what you're talking about, you're not even going to get no, not interested. You're just going to get them marking you as spam and deleting your email,
Boom.
right? Right.
Unsubscribe. Yeah.
And that we want to avoid, right? Because we want engagement, and reply is the best engagement we can get.
Yeah. And listen, if they reply not interested, that's not a bad thing.
That's
okay.
good.
That means that it's getting looked at. There's some information there that they've caught their eye, and it's okay for the not interested. But
right. And then
no,
we're not
it's a real
emailing them
important-
again. Right.
Yeah.
So we're removing someone that we know is not interested. So we're not going to email that party again and get marked as spam. We're only emailing people. And if they're interested and they reply, we're not emailing them again because they're already a lead.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're
Right.
developing the list to continue to email people who have not responded, and you keep going and going. And obviously there's always new people that come into a list. Right. So there's not really an end game. Certainly it may lower volume at some point, but there's not really an end game because there's always turnover and things going on. New businesses coming in, new owners coming in, new employees coming in, so on and so forth.
Timing, situations coming in. I mean, you've got to stay out there. It's like anything. You've got to be relative, and you got to stay out there and always in the eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk technology, right? What's the ideal stack for managing high performing email marketing campaigns or programs? What's some of the programs that you lean on that really give you an opportunity to execute on this stuff?
So you're familiar with one for sure. So the Apollo email API combo is great in just brute force power, simplicity to run, very low cost. Not going to be able to hold reputation quite as well as the server-based structure, but it's so much easier to run. You just win the game that way, right? You're going to get response and do very well. That's the easiest infrastructure or tech stack. Then the other one that's got a little bit more longevity would be your server-based infrastructure with something like Mailreef. Now, there are multiple vendors in the space on both the server side and then the campaign management system side. So you've got two different parts there. But on the server side, Mailreef's probably our favorite, but you've got the MailForge family, those kinds of things. On the CMS side, you have, we're partial to Smartlead, although Mailreef supposedly has a CMS coming out as part of their system. And if they do, that's great. I have to check in with Michael on that, but the owner of the company. But Smartlead is a really good campaign management system that ties in really well with Mailreef. It's got a nice integration. Other things that people might be familiar with or heard of is Instantly. I've never really gotten into Instantly, but Smartlead, and there are others out there now that have come to the fore. That's a great tech stack, but it's more expensive, a lot more complex to manage because we're talking about baseline structure would be, say on a server, you can send 50,000 cold emails a month, 50,000 warming emails, and you're dealing with 20 domains at bare minimum, 5 email addresses per domain. So 100 email addresses sending no more than whatever that works out to. I think it's 25 cold emails a day. It's more complex to run for sure.
Yeah. See, and I'm telling you, everybody, there is a real formula about this. And if you think that just blasting out some emails through your CRM system to the leads that you have purchased or data dumped into your CRM is going to work, it's not. There is a whole nother level to this that I really want to convey, and an importance of this, of understanding that this is like email 10.0. I mean, this is really a different way to do it. Are there some programs that businesses, if you're using them right now, you should just stay away from them, or approaches? And I know we talked about some of the, and more so the CRM and tying it in with an API that, like, that stuff, just it's.
Well, I think HTML emails, if they use that as their core of email marketing to drive leads, that's not going to work. I think that we call those newsletter emails. That kind of email is good to run for branding purposes and stay in front of them and do it once a month kind of thing. That's great, but that's never going to drive leads. That's not the core of your lead generation type email, right?
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
the other side, when we dig into the CRMs, the problem you run into is there's a number of different things. I don't want to pick on any particular product.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. I get it.
1,500 CRMs, and almost all of them now do automated email sequences, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is it's all done in low volume. The domains and email addresses are not tied together, so you can't really build big campaigns. And now one of the challenges we saw coming out of COVID is sales reps start doing their own sequences on their CRM, which I'm not a fan of. Number one, because it should be done at the company level and it should be done
Controlled.
in volume. Secondly,
Yeah.
then sales reps stop making phone calls and they start playing on the CRM all day. I don't want to see
Yeah.
that. That's a waste of time. If they're supposed to be
Yeah.
prospecting, they should be prospecting. Email is not part of what they should be doing, just like LinkedIn. They shouldn't be doing it. There's no reason to. It's a last ditch effort, maybe, to get a hold of a prospect or get a hold of a lead in the process. But at the end of the day, it's a boots on the ground or phone thing, which we can talk about that. But I want them to stay
Yeah.
away from the CRM. CRMs really are not built for high volume email. It's not built. Plus, they're emailing through their main domain so often. And you should
Yeah.
never be cold emailing through your main domain, ever.
Yes. Yeah. And why is that, Kevin? I mean, you and I have talked about it, but I want you to
Yeah.
hit this point. Why should they not be emailing through their own domain?
Well, I mean, there's no way you can do cold emailing in any kind of substance and get response out of it and not get marked as spam somewhat, right? It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, you do that with your main domain, and now you're crossing that with stuff that's supposed to be coming in and out of email addresses. You're ruining your domain's reputation, right? Or at least hurting it, right? So if you get blacklisted on one or more, right, and then you've got Microsoft and Google Workspace where you don't even know if you're blacklisted, right, unless you know how to do the test. All of that, now you can't get deliverability on your normal emails, right?
Yeah.
That's dangerous. You got to be able to get deliverability on your emails to your clients and to people you're actually talking to. Cold emailing is not. That should be done on separate domains for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And give an example, right? Like if my company is XYZ software company and I can create a domain, right? That's XYZ software digital or XYZ software conversion company or something
Right,
that's
anything.
close, which you don't get off the stray, but you do something that's close, and you can create 5 or 6 different domains for that.
Or I mean, the funny thing is, we started using AI to create the mass domain stuff. We had to do 20 or 40 or whatever. Comes up with all kinds of good things, right? You just do the domain and then add something on the back end of it, online, pro, whatever, right? There's all kinds of things.
That's great. That's great. Excellent. Good. All right. So, and I want to get to the salespeople. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. We're going to talk about sales professionals and fixing the pipeline problems, and because obviously email is one of those. But before we do that, last thing I want to talk about on the email side is, what are your rules or your personal rules for subject lines and copywrite that actually get response?
Okay, so the copywriting one I came up with, the subject line one I actually got from somebody else in the space that's a contact of mine. So I can't take full credit for it, but it was really good.
Sure.
So on the copywriting side, we do block style. Everything is about driving response. We do block style. We want to some degree mask the front end of the email, so in the preview they can't see exactly what it's about. Right. So there's some strategy there in copy. And then we just ask the same thing we're doing on a cold call. Hey, do you have this pain point? Curious if you have this problem or pain point. If you do, we can help you solve it. Maybe a little bit about here's how. This is what I want you to do next. I want you to reply and I'm going to send you this. Right. I'm going to send you this PDF, our catalog, this collateral, these samples, whatever it is, to get them to respond. Right. That on the copy side. And block style simply because everybody else types in paragraphs. If you think about the way you might type an email to someone individually, a lot of times you might just do it as one big block of text, right?
Yep.
If you do that, they are forced to, because it's harder with the eyes to jump around. They have to read the email, which then they internalize more often, and that increases your response rate. Increases leads, but increases response in general.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that, because what Kevin talking about in that block space is there's just no spacing in the paragraph. It keeps it very consistent and concise altogether, even on like the name of the person, you're emailing, it all just flows together.
Correct.
Versus pushing out in any paragraphs, and it's an important way, and it actually presents very well too.
It does. I mean, it just comes off more natural because we're trying to replicate what we would do individually manually, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to do.
Yeah. And listen, I want to talk about that a little bit. How do you balance that automation with personalization, these outbound emails? And I know you've touched on it with the block and everything, but where's the tipping point between, that efficientness, being efficient
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also being spammy, right?
Well, I think that companies try to get really crafty by pulling, not just company name, which we will use occasionally, but
Mhm.
started to pull like, recent blog posts and reference the company, like you did your homework on them. Part of the problem is so often if you do it with automation, you end up grabbing the wrong thing. So you can literally embarrass yourself as often as it actually might help you. But because it's been done so much, everybody can read through it. And it doesn't really come off as natural to begin with. Like if I'm going to ask if somebody has a hiring challenge, right? To say they need a really good sales rep, what would why would I really reference anything about them online unless they actually had a job posting, right? Maybe that.
Right.
But outside of that, there's nothing about what their, appearance in some blog. Like why would I ever reference that? That doesn't make any sense. So I
Yeah.
think people on the they try to use that as a way to customize the automation and personalize it, obviously, but it comes off to me as it's easy to read through. Just like even company name, like we really don't use company name that often in emails. We don't.
Yeah.
Some clients we work with do, um, just because the legal entity and the DBA can get confused. And you can
Yeah.
come off
Yeah.
looking foolish that way, just like my legal
Yeah.
entity is totally different than my DBA, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so we use name, first name mostly, last name occasionally, but first name, right? That's the bulk of the
It
personalization
is
that we do.
simple.
Um,
Yeah.
you asked about the subject line thing.
Yes.
So I got this from somebody in the space. Can't take any credit for it, but it's one of the
Okay.
best things I learned. This is 4 or 5 years ago. Really learned how to do email copy about 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And this was one of the things that helped. Is they said, this is a leader in the space, and he said the way we do stuff for clients is tell them to write the subject line as if they're writing to someone in the company they work at, but that they don't know. So in other words,
Very good.
they're within your
Say
company, but
that
you don't
again.
know.
Say that
So
again for
they're in your
everybody. Say that
company, but you
again.
don't know them.
You don't know.
Right? Like
Yeah.
so like for us, our subject lines are first name, their first name, the target, dash, sales rep, right? Or contact,
Yep.
or correct, question mark, or it's just a word. We're not pitching in subject lines. It's actually the same thing we teach about voicemail with reps. Don't pitch in voicemail, don't pitch in subject lines. All you're trying to do is get them to open it. That's your goal.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. Or get them to call you back. One of the two.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So
So
that's,
good.
that's kind of like, but it took some, it took failure to learn this stuff. It's not
Yeah.
like I could
Takes
come
a
up
lot
with
of
everything on
years.
my own. So it's, you got to
Yeah.
learn.
I always say, man, you've got, as long as you're putting in the work ethic, you're going to get stronger skills and you're going to get stronger knowledge.
Yep.
So as long as you keep putting in the work ethic and doing that, essentially you'll earn the right to work smarter versus harder.
Absolutely
Too many people
true.
want to, too many people, and I always do say this, but I'm going to say it again. Too many sales professionals, business professionals, whatever it is out there, they always want to work smarter, not harder. And I think it's such bullshit, because what you have to do is you have to start working harder to understand and earn the right to work smarter.
Absolutely agree.
And
100% agree with you.
it takes time and years, and you and I have both done that.
Yep,
so
it does.
All right, I want to switch the combo here, and let's talk about sales professionals. Fixing
this one we could get sensitive on here.
Let's stay on the pipeline side. But
Yeah.
if a company's B2B sales are struggling, you and I have talked about this.
Mhm.
What is the issue right now with sales reps in organizations?
They're just business development, lead generation. They're just not doing, sales reps are just not making the calls. That's the overriding theme. I'm not saying everybody. I'm not saying every single sales rep at every company. That's obviously not true at all. The overriding theme is companies don't have a sales problem. They got a lead generation problem, right? That's what we hear and see. And it's typically not business development reps are making their calls. So when companies have dedicated reps for that, they're doing better. But when they have a sales team that has, they're account executives and they're building a book of business, or they're supposed to, the closer they get to building their book, however that happened, the less outbound they do. But a lot of times what we're seeing is the biggest problem is brand new reps coming in with these great resumes and they don't move the needle. It's because they don't make
Yeah.
any calls. They want to sell, right? And they're wired to sell, and that's its own conversation. They don't want to sit there and prospect for whatever reason. They don't like it. They don't want to do it, whatever. That's what we see as the overriding problem in companies in B2B.
Yeah. It's a contact sport in the sales world.
It is.
And if you don't have the activity, you're not going to get the sales. And that's it. And if you're an organization, you have to have a way to manage and oversee the activity, and not in a micromanaging way, but just some easy ways to understand what type of activity is going on out there. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the process right now is, really understanding that.
Really quick, you use the term. You use the term activity. No. That was a quote I actually did. On that note, I actually have said that's perfect because I've always said activity breeds business. It's that simple. Go out and make phone. You'll be surprised at what phone calls will do, right? How you run into stuff. And that's going back to the same thing you said before.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, go ahead. Huge. Sorry, I cut you off.
No. Listen, please chime in. This is why we're having this conversation today, is to give it's really activity. I can't stress it enough in organizations. Either there's not enough of it, or the organizations just don't know. Well, I think I hear the word, I hear this word about. You ever hear, it's about. About is one, not a real word, but two, in the sales world, is probably the worst word you can hear. About. It's about. It's about. So don't be an about a company. Okay. Right.
You actually have more knowledge on that than I do, probably.
I know that, but you have a lot of great knowledge because you and I go on our tangents sometimes when we talk about the sales representatives and finding sales professionals. Everybody wants that unicorn. And I don't believe that you have to find a unicorn. What you have to find is somebody who really can just drive activity. And listen, I always said this even when I was first starting. I was taught this actually years ago when I first started in sales and B2B out in the field. And my mentor at the time said, listen, he goes, David, you'll stumble on a deal. If you're out there and you're prospecting and he goes, you'll stumble on a deal. And I remember my first sale, right? I had my first sale that I made when I had my company, and it was a franchise I had at the time, and he was the owner of the company. And I was all pumped up, and I said, man, I got my first sale. And he goes, you didn't close anything. You just stumbled on a deal, right? And he kind of blew my bubble a little bit, but he goes, no, it's a great thing. He wasn't trying to blow my bubble or bust my bubble, but, the reality is, if you have enough activity, you'll stumble on deals, and then, as we talked about, that knowledge and that skill set will improve as you keep working through the process. But what's one action a sales leader can take today, like this week, to improve prospecting performance?
Well, I think the question from the top down for me is always, what are your salespeople supposed to do, right? So in other words, is their job to build a customer base and take care of farmer, let's talk that, manage a customer base. And so part of the problem is we just got to get them to that customer base. Are we dealing with sales reps that are supposed to get paper and then they don't have a relationship with the customer very much in the future? Hunter. And look at those things and say, okay, what should my salespeople be doing? What do I want them to do? Right? What are they paid for? If they are supposed to go prospect, one of the very simple solutions is, first of all, are you tracking their calls at all? If not, maybe you should be. Right? I don't even care about the recordings that much. Some people are really into that. To me, activity still breeds business, right? If they I notice when I look at metrics, if they dial the phone, unless it's completely fake, which we've caught a rep doing one time, the numbers always reflect it. And the other way you can tell is that they will come to you with questions, especially young reps.
Yeah.
Right? If they're coming to you with questions, hey, I got this or this happened or I got this happened, they're working. Look at the phone log and then see if they're having conversations and coming back with questions. If they are, they're doing their job. Right?
Such an important point. I don't want to pass over that. Okay. If you are not getting questions and you're hiring a new team member, a new sales, I don't even care if they're a seasoned sales professional, but they're in a new system. if you're not getting questions, there's nothing happening.
There's nothing happening, right? Like, I mean, it's impossible for a salesperson not to have stuff come up off their calls. Day one,
Yeah.
like, hey, this guy said he needed this, my SDR, and he'll come to me and say, can we fulfill this obligation? Can we do this? Because he was new. Well, I know he was making calls from day one because A, I can see the phone log, and B, he's asking me questions.
Yeah.
Right? He's got
So
specific
true.
circumstances. When he stops doing that ever, right, I can tell things aren't happening anymore. Right? Plus, other things, right? The numbers all tie together. Activity and all the other numbers will kind of flow from it. That's the basic learning thing. I mean, you asked what else can they do? So besides tracking, I mean, I think the question, we talk about sales team structure and looking at sales reps and saying, okay, depending on what their base is or how they're paid and how they're compensated and the investment the company has in them, should your sales rep actually be doing prospecting, right? Is that really something in 2025? Because if we go back to 1970s, 1980s, pre-2000, whatever, we could be talking about comps relative to revenue and relative to sales numbers where it made sense for reps in the United States, plus contact rates and other things, to do all of their own prospecting. But that isn't an easy answer anymore. Like if an enterprise company can afford a $150,000 base and wait for 18 to 24 months for that rep to get ROI, I mean, they can wait on that all day long. And so they're okay with that. When we deal with SMB and especially smaller mid-market, they can't afford a $125,000 sales rep take 24 months to ROI. So now we have to look at it and say, ideally, for me, and again, some teams, salespeople should do their own prospecting or do the prospecting because there's other things in play, right? And I'm all good with it. But there's a lot of times I look at it and say, okay, my goal is I want these sales reps to be busy with prospects. They don't all have to be scheduled, but I want them to be handed decision makers with a pain point, or even just decision makers for that matter, depending on the size of the company and other things. And I can use other people to do all of that legwork so that they are more effective and efficient so I can get the ROI on that salesperson faster. So they are providing value because at the end of the day, let's remember, not just sales, all employees in private for-profit companies either make or save you money. Otherwise, there's no job. That's just true. People don't like to hear that, but it's true. From janitor to reception to C-level, they either make or save you money or both. If they don't, then there's no job, right? It's that simple. Sales specifically, same thing. Like you have to provide value. You have to drive ROI for your employer. So as a company, how do I get ROI out of my people faster, right? So if I can, instead of 8 sales reps, using simple math, maybe I only need 3 or 4, and I've got more marketing and more business development going on to drive them stuff so they're not sitting there doing research that takes them forever to make 20 calls, making 20 calls in a day, right? Now I've got them scheduled, I've got them prospects, I've got them, more efficient, more effective. And so maybe I need fewer sales reps and I need more dedicated business development because it is so hard to get a hold of people. These salespeople are making 90, 125,000 a year base, and that's all part of what we need to look at in sales team structure. And to some degree, it also goes to, is your business development, if you go get them, can it be US people that and earn a sales job by doing business development? Maybe that's not the right
tactic. We talked about that. And we talked about that. And listen, this is a real interesting conversation, right? Because again, we go back to the unicorn. Everybody wants that person who can prospect, and everybody that great person who can present, and the great person who can close. And the reality is, and that's where it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, understanding the metrics of your team. There might be some great people who can prospect and set appointments, but they're just not great presenters or even strong closers. Or maybe you got people who are strong closers and man, they just don't want to prospect, or they're not good at it. Who knows? But if you can identify that, you can start creating structures, because it's always those things where you're like, all right, what's the balance here? Right? Like, how do I create a plan that helps my people? Think of it this way. I always say this: do what they do best. Okay. And you're not going to figure that out in a matter of 1 week or 1 month, even for that matter. It's over time, but understanding the metrics, because when you understand the metrics of your team and their individuals, now you can start doing one of two things. You can either start putting pressure on areas where they need to improve.
Right.
Okay. Or you can start changing the structure of your organization so that they're putting time into those areas that they're actually thriving, and they can elevate that, and then you can fill some gaps for them on that. So
Absolutely.
you got to understand that, but it's a heck of a lot more complicated than I'm making it sound. So I am definitely not trying to make this sound easy, because it is not. It is a constant game of massaging and understanding and
It is.
investigating and
Also,
really
I do think one key point is your salesperson have a long-term relationship with the customer? Are they cross-selling, upselling, filling in inventory, like in a true farmer fashion? Is the sales role that, or is the sales role a hunter that literally, so like, psychometric assessment product that we're tied into, right?
Yeah.
That is a hunter sales role, because the back end support of the software is done by corporate. It's not the salesperson that does it. So they are more a true hunter, right? They're not having to work with that client on a daily basis on the management of utilizing the software. Okay, that's totally different than someone who's going to work with the client and has 50 customers or 100 customers. And once they build the customer base, they get these calls in, and all they're doing is just like they're a glorified customer service rep. To a degree. I mean, yes, they're still selling, but they're a customer service / client support. And so when you actually look at, I'm going to use a phrase, wiring patterns in the case of Aptive Index or a psychometric assessment, the farmer is very different than a dedicated business development person, right? And a hunter sales rep is different than both of them. So part of the problem is you've got to know what kind of sales role you have. What do your finances look like? How long? Because sometimes I'm okay with a farmer who has to go out and build their own book of business and them doing their own cold outreach. But it depends a lot on how much they're compensated on the front end, how you measure them, and how much you hold them to task, right? Because we can't wait. I had this last week with a client, with a prospect who's now a client, right? Who couldn't really couldn't decide on a salesperson, and it's a farmer sales role, but they got to build a book, right? And they've got some leads coming in here and there. Well, they gave the sales rep a year. They never moved the needle. Like they didn't even sell their like he told me, and this sounds mean, but he said they didn't even sell their salary. Not to mention margin. And I was like, a year? How can it take a year? Like you're either generating leads or you're not. It's like you said, if you make the calls, you're going to fall into business by accident, even if you're not a good salesperson. Yeah. I mean,
it's so crazy. And if you're a sales organization, here's the other thing that I want to unpack before we go into one of my next questions is, but you should have a pro forma set up. And this is, again, it all goes back, Kev, to understanding the metrics. Like when you have somebody coming on new, you need to have that ramp up period to say, okay, here's what's expected of you over 6 months or a year or whatever it is. But there's got to be a ramp up and a check-in on certain metrics that need to be met. You can't let somebody go for a year and go, oh, you're not working out, right? I mean, you've got to have these benchmarks as an organization and putting that in play. So, and then the other thing is, which I want you to touch on, is making sure that compensation reflects the right behaviors, right? Like you said, we don't want people who are customer management people trying to be cold call people, or people who are hunters in a role of just managing 50 accounts and not doing any outreach. But how do you have that balance, and understand that as an organization?
I think when we talk to clients, a lot of times the things I ask, right, because my team is also involved in the sales of our recruiting services, but a lot of the things I want to know is, what's your sales team look like now? What's your comp model look like now for your sales? So whether they're account executives, account managers, whatever they're called, what does it look like? Where does that fit with where you are now if you were going to add a salesperson? And how much does experience, because to me, and I'll say it straight up, experience is highly overrated, highly overrated. I want drive. And I want to come back and give you a personal example of that and how much that matters, because experience, highly overrated. Skills, depending on how you want to define that, also overrated. Resume, highly overrated. Do I want to see some, like if we're recruiting for people that need to prospect, which is most of B2B what they need sales that are going to prospect, they need biz dev that's going to prospect, right? Yeah. Do I want to see some cold calling experience on there somewhere? Ideally, yes, because then I have less risk of them flaking out completely, because it's a hard thing to do. Yeah. Right?
Yep.
But one of the things I'll point to that we hear this story all of the time, and you were alluding to it, is experienced sales reps that have these glorious resumes, maybe not even a ton of employers. And it's been, they did $2 million, $5 million in sales. They've hit their numbers. They're great, but they haven't prospected in 15 years. And they command 150,000 base.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think the odds are that a rep at that age that hasn't prospected in 20 years is going to turn around and become a dialing machine overnight when they've been hitting their numbers and dealing with inbound leads and just dealing with their customer base? Like to go to try to answer your question, I'm all about drive, energy, who's going to get after it. Whatever the salary needs to be to find that person. Does that mean they're necessarily younger? Nah, not necessarily. But I want drive. I want energy. I want people who have passion for my products and services. People that did the homework before the interview about my products and services.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So true, man.
On a note of activity, so my personal story, right? I got my break in sales because I started in the golf business when I was a kid as a golf professional. And I started as an independent rep, and so there's a really long story and all of that, but I got my big break was Slazenger, Dunlop, Maxfly, right? Okay. Slazenger from, people know that brand, right? So Dave Brannon, CEO of the company, I got my first big break there. I had barely been a sales rep in the industry for a year. A very famous golf professional told the VP of sales that, because they were interviewing for Indiana, and he said, you need to, here's a few reps that we like, but if you really want somebody that's driven, go call this kid. He's only been working here for like 9 months in Indiana. He gets after it. He is very inexperienced. He's green. I was the 9th of 9 interviews, got the job offer on site. Okay. Now, I want to explain how important drive is, because as far as average sales per customer per year, at the end of my first year, second year, and third year, I was at first below average, and I was barely above average after 3 years. But I was one of the highest in relation to goal. And the reason why is because my first year, I opened the most new accounts in the company of all the reps nationwide, right? That takes pure effort. I'm not a good salesperson naturally. I may be above average, right? Technical things, I'm probably better. But at the end of the day, I'm not really that good of a salesperson. But what I did have was drive. I had energy. And I humped it hard for like months on end. So we had a territory that was doing 300 and some thousand with other reps coming into Indiana to kind of just cover it for a few years. They brought me in. We went for 300 some thousand to 1.2 million first year, 1.5 second, 1.8 when I was leaving third year. That was all drive. I was not a great salesperson, because when I was 2 and 3 years in, my sales manager was like, okay, you have the most accounts in the company. Is there any chance you can start to increase on some of these? Can we increase sales per customer? Do we have some room to move in these? Because there's nowhere else to go with customers at that point. I had almost 500. Like the average rep had 250 to 300, and I had 425 accounts. They're like, we got to get the numbers up per customer a little bit here, because you're killing it everywhere else, but we got it right. And so
you were so busy probably handling the current people you had.
And the little ones.
Right. Yeah. Right. They take
but anyway, time. But to the point of how much activity breeds business, I could walk into places and a rep hadn't called on them in 5 years from a whole bunch of companies. And they'd be like, heck yeah, we'll buy from you. You're the first rep's called on us in like a year. There you go.
Listen, what you're saying is actually a great wind down here in this conversation, because it goes back. I've said this twice, I think, in the meeting. Drive or work ethic will increase your knowledge and your skills. That's it.
Absolutely.
You will naturally get better as a professional and as a leader, and in your results for that matter, just by pushing that one arrow. The other things will come. Don't worry about being the smartest person in the room or listening to this guy or that guy or this. But ultimately, if you drive and you push the drive, everything else will follow. Skills and knowledge will increase. And for a new representative, it's a great story. Anybody listening out here who might be a new sales rep or running an organization who's looking for that perfect sales professional, you need someone who's got drive. You need someone who's got everything else. You can work. If someone's going to work, you can figure that.
And we talk about resume and experience, and this is one last point on recruiting. They talk about how important experience is, or experience in their industry. We hear this all of the time. How many products or services do I really have experienced in 10 years in my agency where the person truly had to have a serious knowledge base in a thing or a category or in products in order to become a successful salesperson at that company, that they really couldn't be trained that easily unless they had that base? There's some chemical stuff. There's some medical stuff. Sure. There's some industrial stuff here and there with really complex wiring and electrical things. But by and large, please don't tell me that if you're a promotional products company, you need somebody with experience selling promotional products or advertising. Seriously? You're slinging ads.
Yeah.
But isn't it that hard? Knock on the door. Could you use more traffic to your website? Can you use more business? How hard was that to train? Do you get what I mean?
So true, yeah,
magazines
totally.
or magazine advertising is its own thing. No, it's not. It's advertising. It's eyeballs. Like, that's the stuff we deal with that
it's crazy.
Give me the kid with drive. Make calls for, as long as they're coachable, intelligent enough to be coachable, right? Look at the G factor and that stuff. That's all we need in most cases. So
good, man.
Yeah.
Listen, this has been a fantastic conversation around sales professionals, email marketing, and I knew we were going to get hot on the sales professional and sales development side. So I want to thank you for being here today. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out and ask you some questions?
Yeah, kevindowney.com. And as part of our recruiting stuff, we're a little bit unique in that we do prospect list building and rep training on the biz dev side in particular as part of our recruiting programs all of the time for clients. It's included.
So good, man.
So
good. So good. Kev, listen, thanks again for being here on the show. It's been a fantastic conversation. We're going to do it again, man, because I think we kind of scratched the surface on the sales rep and
there's so much we can unpack in there.
I know we talk all the time on it, so I know we could probably do another show. But listen, everybody, thanks for listening. As always, share this show, like this show, push it out there. We appreciate all your support. Wealth, health, success to all of you. And as always, I don't care how small it is or how big it is, go get a win today, and we will see you next time. Kev, thanks again.
Appreciate it.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.